as if there is a corpse coming out of the stone. If you look at this with a little bit fantasy, or this one also, it looks like the body of a female. You see the hips, and now we look back to, and here it's like like these statues sometimes of Michelangelo, who also made all these corpses coming out of the stone. So these stones erected here, they were absolutely distinctively chosen to symbolize things. We only have our imagination today to identify this again, but of course there is also lots of speculation in there, but it can be conclusive because of excavations in the surroundings. We know about how these people lived, as I had outlined it a little bit. So now we are heading for this pub building there. That's the famous Red Lion. This is known throughout the country because of very ghostly tales and sayings, because in the medieval ages this stone cycle was actually very feared. They thought the devil is somehow going around that, and the stones might have a bad influence on people. So there are tales of appearances of dead people walking around in the dark and things like that, or walking through walls, and this all focus around this Red Lion Inn. So here we look back to the outer ditch, and again the Sun Temple. So this modern town Avebury now extends into the stone cycle. That hasn't been the case for all the time. We know that when the Anglo-Saxons advanced into southern England in the 6th century, they used the site as a fortification, but soon after they also fled the site, so the settlement moved to the fringe outside because they feared it too, and only in modern times they recaptured the site again. So now we're in the second cycle of this two-cycle site, and in the middle of this is the Moon Temple, which we see now opposite to the road. These stones have been identified as a sanctuary for the moon because they are standing in a way that you can it's actually linked with the moon calendar, and we know that the moon calendar is the original one in Northern Europe, where the moon was observed, and as these stones stand, they are peering points towards the moon in the sky at different phases in the month, during the month and the year. So this was actually very obviously an observation point for determining the moon calendar. And most of the stones, you see one of the peering stones, they still survived, although here we see there is a fence around these central stones of the temple, because people shouldn't approach it too closely. When too many people walk close to the stones, they can disintegrate the ground, so that the foundation of the stones become unstable. So that's a kind of protection. But we see again these geometrical structures here of the stones. These are not like the other ones, where where you can imagine the figures in them, but these noses and geometrical figures, they tell you that there were peerings and simply that they denote specific points for viewing. Okay, now we are going back to the street. Opposite is the second part of this second stone cycle for the moon sanctuary. But we have to cross the street again. I need to be a bit careful because there was traffic in this early morning. So now we approach this fence and we see that there is some sheep in the fence, and we see the outer part of this ditch, and the rampart is very important. It's very interesting that these rampart structures have survived for such a long time. So that was the outer defense of the site, and this is actually more than 4,000 years old and still standing. So now we are heading towards the east. No, that's the west end of the site. Also there is one of these stones which has actually the appearance of a face. So look, if you look at this stone which blocks this entrance, you might imagine a nose and two eyes and also ears at the fringe. It's like a big face that wants to, like a giant that is simply blocking this entrance, spreading some magic over the side, so that simply visitors get frightened when they see that. Okay, and here is the other half of the stone cycle, and the clearing where now the sheep are grazing. Also here there are these concrete markers in between for disappeared stones. And again here it's like a face with a nose, and you see the chin, and like a petrified giant who is buried up to the head in the ground, and this has obviously a meaning. And now we are approaching several stones, simply following up also the sheep. They are walking around, and here we see the whole row again, and also how large this site was. No? So it belonged to a very large community, much larger than, for example, the one that has built Stonehenge. Stonehenge is, of course, the most famous one because of this geometrical architecture of the stones that look like doorways, unlike here in Avebury. But Avebury, of course, which is further in the north, is the much more important center, and it is also older than Stonehenge. But this is not the only stone cycle that there is in Britain. Almost 900 stone circles have been found or identified throughout the country. So you can say that when the agricultural life set in Britain, these stone cycles were the first centers and marks for these peasant